Welcome to Mr. Boogeyman, where every story is a journey into the unknown. If you enjoy the thrill of the eerie and unexplained, consider subscribing for more chilling tales. Rachel adjusted the collar of her uniform, glancing outside as the rain lashed against the diner's windows like an angry child throwing a tantrum. The dark skies roared with thunder, illuminating the night with sporadic flashes of lightning. Time seemed to slow, each minute filled with the restless thrum of the storm. The diner, though familiar and typically comforting, now felt like a solitary island, its fluorescent lights flickering uneasily as if reflecting her growing sense of apprehension. She wiped down a table for the third time, her eyes drifting to the door. It was just her and the usual bubbling of the coffee pot, the muffled sound of water streaming into the drain, making her feel more isolated. The occasional rumble of thunder seemed to echo her disquiet, and she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be different. It was then that the door swung open, and an unfamiliar figure stumbled inside, soaking wet and wind-blown. He stood framed against the darkness, raindrops cascading off his tattered coat like beads of a shattered necklace. The bell above the door chimed, a discordant sound underscoring the oppressive silence of the diner.
"Whew, quite the storm out there, huh?"
he said, his voice a gravelly rasp that sent a shiver down Rachel's spine. The man's eyes darted nervously around the diner, taking in every detail with an unsettling intensity.
Take a seat anywhere,"
she managed to reply, trying to keep her voice steady. He chose a booth in the far corner, the shadows of the diner swallowing him almost whole. As she poured him a cup of steaming coffee, Rachel couldn't help but notice the way he gripped the menu as if it were a lifeline.
"You serve anything good around here?"
he asked, his eyes now fixed on her, revealing a flicker of something unsettling beneath his seemingly polite facade.
"Well, we have burgers, sandwiches, and—"
she began, but he cut her off abruptly.
No. I need something special, something different."
His tone shifted, a hint of desperation weaving through his words.
"I was told you could provide special services."
Rachel forced a smile, her hands trembling slightly as she set the cup down.
I'm afraid it's just the usual diner fare tonight.
He leaned in closer, the scent of wet earth and stale tobacco enveloping her senses.
"But can you really be sure? Not everything is as it seems, is it? I could tell you stories worth a good meal."
Her breath caught in her throat as the lights flickered again, this time plunging the diner momentarily into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator ceased, amplifying the oppressive silence. When the lights returned, she could see the man was smiling, but it was a twisted expression that made her insides twist with unease.
"Tell me, Rachel,"
he said, his tone lowering to a conspiratorial whisper.
"what are you willing to sacrifice to survive the night?"
The question hung in the air, sharp and uneasy, as the storm continued to rage outside, and Rachel could only stare at him, her heart pounding in her ears. The diner, once a refuge, now felt like a trap, and she was its prey. As the rain drummed relentlessly on the roof, Rachel couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that hung in the air like the acrid scent of burnt coffee. The stranger's smile twisted like the shadows around him, and the weight of his gaze felt like an unwelcome hand on her shoulder. Taking a deep, unsteady breath, she gathered her courage, uncertain of her next move.
Why don't you tell me what you want?
She asked, forcing the words out, her voice inadequately steady. It was a gamble, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control in a situation spiraling beyond her grasp. He leaned back, his expression inscrutable.
I'm hungry for something more than food, Rachel. I need to know what you're willing to sacrifice for your continued hospitality.
His eyes gleamed with an unsettling eagerness, and as he spoke, he gestured toward the back of the diner where the restricted storage room stood, its door securely locked and forgotten in the dusty shadows.
There are things back there, things that could change the course of this night for both of us.
The pit in her stomach deepened as his request echoed ominously in her mind. The storage room contained old equipment, boxes of utensils, and items that were meant to be kept out of sight from customers. But what did he truly want? Rachel's heart raced as she considered the possibility that he knew more about her than she had shared openly. Perhaps he had been watching her.
Listen, I can't just go back there.
She replied, her voice quavering slightly, despite her efforts to sound firm.
It's against the rules.
Rules?
He scoffed, his tone sharp.
What good are rules in a storm like this? Life is riddled with exceptions, wouldn't you agree? Besides,
He leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a barely audible whisper.
would you rather remain here, trapped in this diner with a stranger, or would you like to discover what's hidden behind that door?
Rachel swallowed hard, glancing at the door that led to the chaotic world beyond the diner's warm lights. She felt the storm's oppressive weight pressing down upon her. The racket outside was consuming. It had become louder, more deafening, as if it too were trying to stifle her thoughts. Suddenly the bell above the entrance rang sharply, its sound almost jarring in the thick tension. Rachel's eyes darted toward the door, relieved for just a moment. But when she turned back, the stranger was watching her, an unsettling anticipation brewing behind his unnerving smile. She couldn't resist the clawing curiosity along with the fear that this encounter could lead them both down dark paths. And the more she ruminated on his insinuations, the more she felt the pull of desperation.
What do you want?
She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper.
Now, that's the spirit.
He exclaimed, clapping his hands together, the sound echoing sharply in the eerie silence.
Just a little willingness to explore is all I ask. Fetch me the key to that storage room, and I promise the night will unfold in ways you can't yet fathom.
Rachel hesitated, considering the consequences. To comply meant stepping deeper into a realm of uncertainty, possibly from which she might never return. Yet the storm lay heavy on her mind, and the thought of being at the mercy of this stranger left a bitter taste lingering on her tongue. With her heart pounding, she resolved that she had to buy time and find a way to re-establish a sense of control. Perhaps breaking the very rules that now seemed so trivial was her only way to outsmart this man. As she slowly walked towards the back, a flash of lightning illuminated the diner, and for a brief moment she could see his expression, a mixture of triumph and ravenous expectation. The stakes were rising, and Rachel felt a chilling realization that the night was only just beginning. Rachel's heart raced as she stepped closer to the back door, the key clutched tightly in her hand. She could feel the weight of his gaze piercing through her, as if he were unraveling every secret she had ever hidden. With each step, she waded deeper into a murky sea of dread and determination. Just as she reached the door, she paused and turned to face him, her voice trembling but resolute.
Why are you doing this?
she demanded, struggling to suppress the panic swelling inside her.
What do you want from me?
His laughter echoed off the diner's walls, a sound coated in malice that sent chills racing down her spine.
Oh, Rachel, you're so naive. It's not just about the diner or its meager treasures. It's about you, the little pieces of yourself you've kept buried beneath the surface. You've always wanted more, haven't you?
His eyes gleamed, revealing a twisted delight as he continued.
I'm just here to help you discover how far you're willing to go for a taste of freedom.
With her fists clenched, Rachel battled the urge to flee. She grasped the doorknob and then turned, feeling both empowered and deeply afraid.
You don't know anything about me.
She shot back, the words laced with defiance.
Oh, but I do.
He sneered, stepping closer, his shadow stretching ominously across the dim diner.
I've followed you long enough to know your secrets, the dreams you think are unreachable, the shackles you still wear, and tonight the storm offers us a chance to break them.
Suddenly the air shifted, crackling with tension as he lunged forward, and Rachel instinctively dropped the key. It clinked to the floor, skidding away from her. She had only a heartbeat to consider her next move. With desperation fueling her resolve, she darted around a nearby table, using it as a shield between them.
What do you really want, then?
She spat as she searched for an escape route in the chaos of the diner. His smile twisted into a grimace.
You're wasting time, Rachel. I want what you owe me. The key to the room will unlock more than just a door. It will unlock the potential for both of us.
He moved forward, reaching for her, but she dodged and pushed a chair in his path. In that moment of confrontation, the storm outside mirrored the turmoil brewing inside the diner. Winds howled, rain lashed against the windows, and the lights flickered ominously, casting long shadows across the walls. Rachel realized she had to outsmart him, use her familiarity with the diner's layout to her advantage. Rushing toward the kitchen, she remembered the heavy pots and pans hanging above the stovetop. Grabbing one, she turned just as he entered, his movements sharper and more perilous. With all her might, she swung the pan down, landing it against his shoulder. He let out a grunt of surprise, stumbling back momentarily.
Stay away from me.
She shouted, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The situation had escalated from unsettling to life-threatening, and she was determined to end this nightmare on her own terms. Fleeing towards the storage room, she could hear his footsteps thundering behind her. She took a risk, slamming the door shut and locking it. For a moment she paused to gather her thoughts, her breath coming in quick gasps. Distantly, she could hear him banging on the other side, his rage echoing, the sense of power she sought to reclaim, slipping through her fingers. As her mind raced, she scanned the dimly lit room, hoping to find something, anything, that could help her turn the tide. Old boxes piled high loomed over her like specters of her past, and a glimmer caught her eye in the muted light. A rusty wrench lay atop a cardboard box, abandoned yet full of purpose. Rachel reached for it, her fingers wrapping tightly around the cold metal, and prepared herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. She was no longer just a victim. She was ready to fight for her survival. As the storm reached its ferocious apex, the diner quaked under the force of the howling winds and torrential rain. Rachel's heart pounded in rhythm with the chaos outside, a primal drumbeat urging her onward. Clutching the rusty wrench like a lifeline, she took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders as the door rattled violently under the weight of the stranger's fury.
Come on, Rachel. You think you can hide forever?
His voice dripped with a mix of mockery and menace, sending adrenaline racing through her veins. The violent clang of metal on metal echoed, a reminder of the confrontation brewing just beyond her barricade. She could feel the power of her resolve blossoming within her. She was no longer just a hapless waitress caught in the tangled web of his sinister game. Cautiously, Rachel edged closer to the door, her heart racing with each creak of the old wooden floor. She could hear him muttering on the other side, formulating his next move, and she knew it was now or never. With a swift motion, she twisted the lock, pushing the door open just wide enough to sidestep his lunging grip. Before he could regain his balance, Rachel swung the wrench with all her might, catching him across the jaw. The satisfying crack resounded through the air, and for a fleeting moment, triumph surged within her. But he was quick to recover, fury igniting his features as he lunged again, this time with a wild ferocity.
Do you really think you can fight me?
He snarled as they wrestled for control. Rachel's breath came in short gasps, her body fueled by sheer desperation and survival instinct. She ducked and weaved, using the diner's familiar layout to her advantage, leading him around booths and tables like a dancer in a deadly waltz. Each near miss pushed her to become faster and more cunning, her mind racing with strategies born from years of waiting tables. Suddenly, Rachel spotted the heavy metal coffee pot left forgotten on the counter. Without a second thought, she dashed toward it, scooping it up just as he closed in. As he lunged again, she turned and swung the pot with fierce determination, delivering a solid blow that sent him reeling back.
Stay away from me,
She cried out, fear translating into a fierce battle cry as she prepared to fight for her life. With renewed resolve, Rachel seized her moment of advantage, her mind spinning with ideas gleaned from countless busy shifts at the diner. She dashed into the kitchen, cluttered with an array of pots, pans, and utensils, every tool at her disposal in an impending showdown. Desperation lent strength to her resolve as she improvised using her surroundings. In a matter of moments, she had set a makeshift barricade behind her and reached for a handful of dry dish towels, jamming them into the gaps to slow him down. She didn't have much time. As he burst through the kitchen door, frantic and furious, Rachel threw the coffee pot toward him, followed by an avalanche of grease-covered towels. The confusion threw him off balance, giving her the crucial seconds she needed. With every ounce of her strength, Rachel charged, wrench in hand, navigating the chaos to land a decisive blow. The diner transformed into a battleground illuminated by flickering lights, the storm's fury an echo of the struggle within. She felt the surge of her power, still small but growing exponentially within her, fusing with the storm outside as she faced down this embodiment of her fears. Finally, with one last desperate swing of the wrench, Rachel caught the stranger on the side, sending him sprawling across the floor. Breathing heavily, she positioned herself over him, wrench raised, ready to strike again if necessary.
Why? Why would you try to break me?
She asked, voice steady despite the tempest that raged within her. In the tangled web of their confrontation, something shifted. A fleeting moment of vulnerability cracked the veneer of his menace. As sirens wailed in the distance, the raw adrenaline ebbed, replaced by a stark clarity. The stranger's laughter faded into a low growl of defeat, and Rachel felt the encroaching light of the storm's end. With shaky hands, she reached for her phone, breathing a temporary sigh of relief, but aware that this night would haunt her. The police burst through the diner door moments later, bringing with them a flood of safety that overtook the lingering shadows of fear. Rachel's heart softened, knowing this terrifying ordeal was finally close to an end. She had fought for her survival and emerged battered but unbroken. As the storm began to dissipate outside, Rachel sank into a booth, her body heavy with exhaustion and relief. This night had twisted her reality, but she also felt the chains of her past loosening just a little, reminding her that freedom often lay just beyond the darkness. With the dawn approaching, Rachel knew that she had to confront not just the remnants of the storm, but also the scars it left behind.